welcome to this edition of Stream On. I'm Jim Williams, your host. And this week, we're going to take a look at a Britbox Original. It's called Time. My guest is writer Jimmy McGovern, the man behind the BBC hit series. And it stars the very talented duo of Sean Bean and Stephen Graham. Now, Time is a series that revolves around two men on different sides of the bars in the UK prison system. They both are trying to atone for past actions while seeing if true redemption is even ever possible. Time now garnered rave reviews from critics in the UK, which is almost unheard of. But more importantly, it was a hit with the viewers, as it was the most watched show on the BBC thus far in 2021. And allow me to introduce our guest for the day, the writer of Time, Jimmy McGovern. Jimmy, you have to be pleased, not only with the critic reviews that came from the UK, but the fact that thus far, Time has been the most watched show on the BBC in 2021.
Yes. I know for a fact the BBC were taken by surprise because it was sometime after it was shown they asked me to do a second series, and anyway I said no, but I don't think anybody expected it to have the effect it did have, and as you say, it's gratifying. There are grounds for optimism in there because the British people, just like the American people, I'm sure, are often told that the great public just wants the keys turned in the lock and the keys thrown away and let them all rot in there. But that is not the case. I think Time and the audience it got proves that people are interested in how people are incarcerated and how they are treated. You know?
Well, this is a very gritty, very intense show, and it seems like with each and every episode, you're hooked and you just want more. In many ways, it reminds me of a show that we had here in the US a while ago called The Wire.
Oh yes.
And it didn't sugarcoat anything, but it did give you that, as you say, the same thing that Time does. It gives you multiple perspectives of what it's like behind those bars.
Yes. I think that came about because I'm a writer, and because I'm a writer, I wanted to write about the things that interest me.
Right.
But of course, it's very difficult to write about all the things that interest me when you're mainly focusing on one main character and one main prison officer.
Right.
But in broadening it out at times and touching on the parole system, you don't get parole until you can testify to the fact that you now know who is boss, the prison officer. To focus on a compulsive gambler, that just enabled me to touch upon all those things that interest me anyway, and it did help to broaden things out within the prison. It made the prison itself become more alive, didn't it? The fact that we were hearing more voices. Yes.
Well, it's also like any good show, okay? It's got layers. And just when you think that you know what's going on, you open another door to another story, to another opportunity, to another thing that we can get hooked on. And so, I mean, this is like, this may sound silly, but it's like a good meal, right? Just when you think you've gotten the best, there's even better. And it just keeps going and going. And so you've served up quite a little meal here, Jimmy.
Yes, it's nice. It's really nice to hear that. I'm so glad you enjoyed it in that way, and that's what we intended to do. I think it's emphasized even more because I originally intended it to be 4 parts, but in the writing of it, the BBC said to me, if we can do it as 3, we'll give you the green light now.
Mm-hmm.
And me being a writer, of course,
Right.
I'll have the green light now. and so I only wrote 3 parts. And I think I do think that has a profound effect upon the speed and the variety, the huge variety of viewpoints we get. You know, it is emphasized even more. But there
Yeah.
was some good stuff that I wanted in there as well. I was going to explore the prison chaplain an
Mm-hmm.
awful lot more, you know, and you know, to talk about how she felt about the faith, about her
Mm-hmm.
Catholicism, about the work she does, and the effect it has on her parents. You know, there was an awful lot of that which didn't see the light of day, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it did. I don't know. It did intensify everything, didn't it?
Well, yeah, it brought everything to the fore quickly, you know,
Yes.
and that's not a bad thing.
No, it's
it's
not.
just a
It's
thing,
not.
you know.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
I think
Yes. But
like all good writers,
of course,
Jimmy, and
yes.
go ahead.
Yes. The thing that isn't in there, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and it's true, it's undeniably true, it is lacking in there, is the boredom of prison life. You know, the
Right.
the biggest, baddest thing about a British prison is the boredom. You know, it's very hard to put boredom on the screen and make it interesting. You know, so that's been we, we we do not address that in any way. And that also adds to the intensity, I think, of the piece. You know.
Right, but I think in what you've been able to do, like you're talking about the chaplain, right? Um, that's
Oh yes,
where with the boredom comes the opportunity to do a lot of introspection and a lot of looking at your faith or lack of faith or any other thing that might
yes,
be going on in your life. And I think that's where you really tapped into it was through that, you know, time that you have. And my God, there's so much time that is unaccounted for, right? That it's not like you're going to
yes,
book club or anything like that. I mean, you're going to do what you've got to
yes,
do, and it's going to be done in time. And I think that's what you were able
yes,
to capture in the show was that, you know, there were that the time the prisoners had was time they used to really get into themselves.
yes, yes. Um, yes. There's a couple of things I'd like to say on that, and
Sure.
we chose the title carefully because I don't think prison works. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that. I don't think prison works at all. But what does work is
Mm-hmm.
time. You know, the Sean Bean character arrives at the point at which he arrives because of time.
Mm-hmm.
He spends such an inordinate amount of time thinking, thinking about what he did and ruining it, despising himself for it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so a prison doesn't work in any way whatsoever, but time does. Time allows people to reconsider, you know, to discover themselves. You know, and there was another aspect of that I wanted to say that I've forgotten about it. It's the perils of aging. You know. Oh yes, it was that lovely notion of the two simultaneous funerals. You know,
Yeah.
occurring up there in the prison chapel when
Mm-hmm.
he's not allowed to attend his father's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
but the prison chaplain conducts the service anyway. You know,
Right.
I just think that's a beautiful sequence. It really is. You
Well,
know?
you know, one of the other things, and it was a beautiful sequence. It was a fantastic one.
Yes.
But the other thing too that I think is important to note is that the way you wrote it, to me, that was brilliant, was that time, okay, we only have so much time on this earth to begin with, right? And
Mhm.
it's not to be wasted. It's not to be, squandered. And that I think was something you really tapped into in this show, this series, is that every bit of time needs to be accounted for, and I think that's what you really tapped into.
Yes, yes, uh, yes. Even I actually think Sean Bean has never been better
Hmm.
than he is in this. I think he's a brilliant, brilliant actor. I really do.
Hmm.
Uh, but he's at his very best when he's simply sitting in the cell,
Right.
listening to the noise going on outside his door,
Hmm.
and he doesn't want to go outside that door.
Hmm.
Uh, there are moments like that. I think that are wonderful. We were blessed with a great director in Lewis Arnold. Wonderful, wonderful casting crew.
Hmm.
Tremendous director. He really is good. That guy, and he did me proud. He really did. Um,
Well, so many times, writers look back at how their scripts or their books or whatever are taken, and oftentimes they're not pleased with it. And clearly,
yes,
this team that was put together, from the actors to the producers to the directors to the writers, clearly this team channeled your writing and did it very well.
yes, yes. They did. Um, I, I, I actually worked hard on the scripts.
Hmm.
I know the scripts were good. I did an awful lot of research.
Right.
I put an awful lot of hard work into it. But I've done that with other projects too,
Hmm.
and they've not had the same impact at all. The impact of this piece was down to the assembly of all the talents. You
Hmm.
know, cast was fantastic. Even the small parts. There were young scout. We call them scousers. If you're from Liverpool,
Hmm.
you happen to be known as a scouser. So there were young scouse actors in there who are going to go on to do really great stuff. You can see how good they are. A great designer. An editor who was tough. One of the toughest editors I've ever had in my life, but
Hmm.
was so bloody good, so
Yeah.
good.
Did you have?
Cameramen, they're brilliant.
Yeah, it was very well. I mean, the way it was shot was intense. I mean, you really couldn't,
Yes.
viewer, you really couldn't relax. You know what I'm saying? And that's not a
No.
bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. But you
No.
just you had to pay attention. It was one of those things where if somebody walked in the room and opened their mouth, you're like, "Shut up!" It's like you need to
Yes.
be quiet because I can't miss a word of dialogue here, because the dialogue was, that's the key, was that hearing what was being said in the moment.
Yes. Yes. It was. The other interesting thing as well is every single scene was shot in a real cell. You
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the cameraman did it, because there are very few cameramen, I think, who can shoot in confined spaces.
Sure.
But this guy could. It was absolutely brilliant, and it was in a proper British prison cell, in a
Hmm.
proper British prison.
Right.
And he made them all come alive. Made them
Hmm.
all come alive. Yeah, yeah,
Did you have any say in the? You're talking about the wonderful cast and Sean Bean and the rest.
yeah.
Did you have any say in the casting of the show?
In the casting, um, uh, as regards two people, I had Sean Bean and Stephen Graham in
Uh-huh.
mind right from the off,
Okay.
and I wrote for them. I
Mhm.
envisaged them, and of course, when we got them, I was absolutely delighted. And then
Mhm.
COVID struck, and
Mhm.
so the time of the shoot was put back several
Sure.
months. And I thought, oh, we're bound to lose them now because they'll go elsewhere. They'll go to America or somewhere.
Sure.
But we kept hold of them, you know. That was really, really good. So I had those two actors in mind, and the director, I was consulted on the choice of director, and I had just watched a thing called Des, which was about a very notorious killer in this country, and that was directed by Lewis Arnold, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I was consulted over Lewis as well, but then once we appointed Lewis, he and the executive producer decided on what team to bring in, you know. So I've always argued that as a writer, I expect some consultation on the choice of director, yes, but having chosen the director, you then back the director's judgment to the hill, you know. And that's what I've always done. I've always backed the director's judgment. If the director wants an actor, the director gets that actor, as far as I'm concerned. You know?
So that it's always been the director who's been the person who you've channeled your vision.
Yes, and he did it superbly.
Yeah. Well, and he got the
He's only a young guy as well. I think he's only in his 20s. I think maybe in his late 20s. Yeah.
He's gotten, he's proven that he is clearly someone who is a force to be reckoned with for times to come.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's going to be in the USA soon, isn't he? You just know.
Well, you know, we're not out to grab everybody. I think it's the key. The key, I think, you know, it's funny, Jimmy, that the key now, because of things like Britbox, right, and streaming services in general, is that we in the U.S. can enjoy your content and your product from the BBC, from ITV, you know, from CBC in Canada, from, you know, the networks in Australia, where content right now has never been better valued than it is. And the fact that we being able to see time in real time almost, you know, in the old days, we'd have to hope and pray that maybe Masterpiece Theater or somebody, you know, would pick it up and bring it here. And that would be 2 or 3 years after it happened. But that's not the case any longer. We don't have to wait that long to get good quality. So, you know, I think what that means is for writers like yourself, for talent, for directors, that this is kind of a golden age of content, because we're getting to see it. And it doesn't matter if it's from Sweden. It doesn't matter if it's from the UK or Australia or where it comes from. We, throughout the world, you know, via streaming, and here in the United States through Britbox, we get to see the best of, you know, the BBC and ITV, and we don't have to wait for it.
It's a great thing. The only downside to that, of course, is in the old days, if something was bought by the Americans, you were quids in as a writer. But no, it's not quite the same now with Britbox, you know. So, but I'm all for it. I totally agree with you. You know, it's great to see such a wealth of material. It really is.
Special thanks to my guest, Jimmy McGovern, the man behind the BBC hit series Time, now playing on Britbox. All the information on the show is in the show box below. We'll be back with more of Stream On right after this from BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
At BMW, we know leaving the road wasn't easy, but anticipating our return taught us to appreciate every drive. The exhilaration of the ultimate adventure. Moments spent with your favorite co-pilots. And the freedom to explore just because. Our time to rejoin the road is finally here.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, if you're not one of the over 75,000 people worldwide who've joined our little party here, First of all, shame on you. Second of all, we make it simple. It is free. You can find us at iTunes. You can find us at, of course, Apple Podcasts. Same thing over at the Google Play Store with Google Podcasts. You can find us at Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and YouTube, just to name a few. Now, if you have an assistant device like Alexa or Siri or Google, just ask them, please play the latest edition, Stream On with Jim Williams, and they will be happy to do it for you. Now, if you still can't find us, not to worry. All you have to do is pull out the old Google machine, type in Stream On with Jim Williams, hit the favorite button or the subscribe button, and each week you're going to get a brand new edition of the podcast sent directly to your phone, your tablet, or to both, okay? So please go out there and do it today. We greatly would appreciate it. Also, we love the feedback, and you guys are really super about that. All of the information in the show box below on how to reach us on social media. It's a lot of fun hearing what you guys are watching, and a lot of times you contribute to what we talk about here. So speaking of which, a lot of you from Australia kept telling us about this great show that Lucy Lawless is in, and that's called My Life is Murder. Now, this week, Series 2 of My Life is Murder is on Acorn TV, and we love Lucy. Lucy was a friend of the podcast. She's been on the podcast before. We wish her all the best, and we hope actually to talk to Lucy soon. But Lucy Lawless and My Life is Murder is back for Series 2 on Acorn this week. Other shows coming back on this week is AP Bio, which is on Peacock. $1 Million Listings Los Angeles. That's one of my favorite ones. It's a lot of fun. It's on Bravo this week. Also, Money Heist on Netflix, a good film, something worth watching. Definitely. Part 2 of Season 5 of Billions starts this week on Showtime. That's a must-see. Help, I Wrecked My House. That's right, coming to HGTV this week. Queen Sugar on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. Into the Night, also this one on Netflix. Lucifer comes back for yet another series. That, of course, coming this week on Netflix. And, of course, The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. That's a new one on Bravo. Now, the finales coming this week. Housebroken on Fox. Duncanville, also on Fox. Growish on Freeform. The World's Strongest Man competition on CBS Paramount. And finally, Good Trouble on Freeform. So that's some of the stuff that you are going to see this week. And as I said, some of them are new debuts. Some of them are on their way out. Okay, so check it out this week. And we highly recommend, if you're going to binge Billions, because it's a fantastic show, or Lucifer, either one, because both are good. And, you know, we're getting new content from them coming this week. So by all means, check them both out. Okay, that's Billions and Lucifer. Those are your homework assignments for the week for binging TV. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We will be back with you next week, and we'll be talking to the folks at Roku about their big 4th anniversary. Okay, so that's Roku next week and their 4th anniversary, and we're going to talk about how they became not just a streaming platform, but how they now are getting into the programming aspect. So that's all things Roku next week on Stream On with Jim Williams. Well, for myself and the entire team at Stream On, we want to thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful and safe weekend, and we'll see you next time right here on Stream On.